This text is the third in the series called The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. So we've done the first two, Approaching the Buddhist Path and the Foundation of Buddhist Practice, before, and all those teachings are online. And so this one will be conducted similarly. So I'll read the book and then comment on it. And I'll tell you a little bit of the story about how this whole series came to be written, although the series isn't finished yet. But before we start each session, we will do a visualization and some recitations to clarify our spiritual direction that we're practicing the Buddhist path. So we will recite an homage to the Buddha and take refuge and generate bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is so we know why we're practicing this path. And then I think there will also be a mandala offering, right, to request teachings. So when we do the recitation at the beginning, I won't always say this, so it's up to you to remember. Yeah, but we're not saying everything into empty space. You know, we're sitting here, we're imagining in the space in front of us all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all of our spiritual mentors, and they're looking at us quite happily because we're going to study and learn and contemplate the teachings. And surrounding us, we think of all sentient beings who are also very happy that we're practicing, because when we practice, not only will we become a kinder person in this life, but we will progress on the path to awakening. And then when we're awakened, we can be of greater benefit to them. Yeah, so take a moment and generate this visualization. And really think that you're sitting in the presence of all the holy beings who have done what you aspire to do, and that they're all happy that we're doing what we're doing, and they're ready to help us and inspire us along the path. And then let's generate our motivation. And since we will be studying His Holiness's book, let's make our motivation the same as his motivation. This is how we join our minds with the Buddha's minds, how we receive the blessings and inspiration from our teachers and the holy beings, by putting effort into making our minds be like their minds. So think of all the countless sentient beings, all of whom want happiness and not suffering. And yet continually create the causes for suffering. So even though beings like that may act out of ignorance, anger, and attachment, when we think of them as controlled by their mental afflictions in this way, then there's space for compassion to arise in our mind, rather than judgment and criticism. And this compassion wants them to be free of all their dukkha, all of their unsatisfactory experiences in samsara. And with love, we want them to have all happiness. And with this, let's generate the bodhicitta, taking upon ourselves the responsibility to lead sentient beings to awakening. And in order to do that, we have to free ourselves first. And to do that, we have to learn, reflect, and meditate on the teachings. And so we're starting that process with learning about samsara, nirvana, and Buddha nature. So let that be your motivation for listening. So, samsara, nirvana, and Buddha nature. On the cover is part of the picture of that explains the 12 links of dependent arising, with the Lord of Death holding the wheel of life in his clutches. And we will get into later on in the book the actual 12 links and how this illustration describes them. But seeing the cover sets the stage for the principal topics that we're going to be working on, which are the four truths. Okay, so the truth of dukkha, of its origins, its cessation, and the path to that cessation. So I thought I would start reading just a little bit from the preface. I'm not going to read the whole preface. That talks about how the book came about. Okay. So I could probably just tell you offhand too. But once upon a time, okay, so I had been studying Tibetan Buddhism since 1975 and learning from the Tibetan masters who were really excellent and using the Tibetan texts. But I also realized that me and the others from the West who didn't grow up as Buddhists were lacking the kind of foundation to understand what the teachings were all about. We were taught the Lam Rim, which starts out about how to rely on a spiritual mentor, and we're going, what's that? And then from there into precious human life, where we're supposed to feel fortunate that we're not born as a hell-being hungry ghost or animal, and we're going, huh? And, it continued on from there. So the teachings were wonderful, but it became really obvious that many of us needed foundation teachings first. Okay. So, I had the idea to ask His Holiness to write a short root text that then the Tibetan Geshes could use when they taught the Westerners. And this short text would have topics like, the two truths and the four truths and rebirth and how our happiness and suffering depends on the mind, and these kind of topics that we need to understand first. What is the mind? What is the body? Yeah. And His Holiness very often, when he teaches in the West, would start out with these topics, but the Tibetan texts wouldn't do that. So it took me a couple of years to get an appointment with His Holiness. But I went in, it must have been, I don't know if I put the date in here. It must have been 1995, sorry. Oops, 1995. So I requested him to write a short text on the stages of the path that lamas could use when teaching serious students new to Buddhism. Then, much to my surprise, His Holiness said, okay, that a larger book needed to be compiled first, and then from that we'll make the shorter one. And then he handed me a transcript from a Lam Rim teaching that he had just finished giving, and sent me on my way to start writing this larger text, okay? So at that time, the idea, at least my idea, was it would be one volume, and it would contain everything, but with this nice introduction, of the topics that we needed. Okay, so, and then His Holiness said, he was saying that this book needed to be different. It shouldn't just be another Lam Rim book, because there's no use to write another one. There's lots of excellent ones already. So he said it must contain material from the philosophical treatises, so that the readers would really gain more understanding of those texts. And, so he sent me on my way. So I started writing. And it takes a long time to get an appointment with His Holiness, like years, okay? So I just kept writing. And finally I got another appointment, and because I wanted to ask questions to him, because I had compiled from many of my friends a list of questions that non-Tibetans often have about the teachings. And, so this book had to contain that kind of material. So I went in and I started asking those questions. And then I can't remember if it was that interview or the next set of interviews. But then he said, well, yeah, not only the philosophical text, but the Pali tradition, that needs to be in this book too. And let's throw in Chinese Buddhism for good luck. And, and he would have, had all the other kinds of Buddhism as well, except we kind of stopped there because that was enough, And so he sent me on my way that time with a letter from the private office, so that I could go to Thailand and study with a Thai master and, learn some of the Pali tradition directly there. So I started writing, and I kept writing, and then, I went to Thailand. It was a wonderful experience being part of a monastery there, being the only Bhikshuni. Actually, at that time, I was the only nun at that monastery. They didn't really know what to do with me, because they couldn't sit me with the lay people because I was a Bhikshuni, but they couldn't sit me with the bhikshus because I was a Bhikshuni. So I was somewhere in between. And, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And the master there, Achananand, was very generous with teaching and answering questions and so on. And the next time I went back to His Holiness, I had about 2,000 pages written. And he said, well, we got to read these, so let's, to check them. So we started reading. I think we got through about 4. And then when I told the secretary that His Holiness said we were going to go through all of the pages, many volumes, he almost fainted. And he said, no, we got to work something else out. And then His Holiness said, yes, we do. And so then he appointed various geshis to work with me first. I had worked with Geshe Lakdor, and then Geshe Dorji Damdol, and now Geshe Damdol Namgyal, And then at different sets of interviews, His Holiness would often invite different geshes to come and join in the discussion. Okay, so yeah, it was really something. Let's see. So let me read a little bit from here. So His Holiness often invited 2, 3, or 4 geshes, and sometimes his brother Nari Rinpoche, to join the interviews and engage them in intriguing discussions about the topics I raised. Okay. So I felt a little bit like Shariputra. I asked a question. Okay, that's the extent to which I'm like Shariputra. I don't have his wisdom. But I asked a question, and then His Holiness and the geshes would join in, and they would discuss it, and this fantastic discussion, all in Tibetan, which I don't understand. And the translator would try and translate, but they were going so fast, and they wouldn't stop. And then, so finally, sometimes in the afternoon, I got translations or a little bit during it. And, I recorded things and then went home and transcribed and so on. But it was wonderful, listening to them. And I just wished I could understand the whole thing. So I have everything is taped. Yeah, so that maybe next life when I know Tibetan, or whenever I know Tibetan, or whenever the tapes are translated word for word, then can know all of it. But a lot of it was just the discussion to come up with a conclusion. Yeah, and there were some topics that they would debate. Like there was one of them. I was asking, how does a yogi see our world, our human realm? Because we always hear, well, a yogi sees it as Pure Land. So, well, what does that mean? Yeah, they see it as a Pure Land. So I asked the question, and and the conclusion was they all broke out laughing and said, I don't know. Okay. So, so the section in this book about karmic seeds and having ceased, which is in chapter 5, came from one of these interviews. I asked about the similarities and differences between karmic seeds and having ceased. And a lengthy, energetic discussion punctuated with much laughter followed. The discussion and debate continued after the session with His Holiness as I asked the geshes more questions over tea. At the end, we concluded that there were many more questions and points of debate to explore. And there really were, like initially when you asked the first question, they just explained, well, this is a karmic seed and this is a having ceased. Okay, that's fine. You write it down. You think you understand it. Then you start thinking, well, what's the difference between them? And do you really have to have both? Or is one needed and the other isn't needed? Okay. And you start asking this, and is there a having ceased of the having ceased? Yeah, and having ceased of the having ceased of the having ceased. Yeah. And how do things ripen? What does it mean? How does a seed ripen? How does a having ceased bring a result? Okay. And what are these things? They're impermanent. Are they form? Are they consciousness? Are they abstract composites? So once you start thinking about a topic, you have gazillions of questions. So then you understand why the monks and nuns debate, because it helps you to look at these topics. So while writing, it sometimes seemed that I was translating from English into English. Okay, so philosophical texts are lengthy, filled with debates, and often had sentences that are 1 page long. Seriously, those of you who have learned even a little Tibetan, yeah, one sentence starts here, it ends here. Okay. So, translating literally is you have to break it up somehow to put it into our language. So we had to extract the important points and express them in easy to understand English, including background material when necessary and examples to help the reader understand. Okay, because if you've picked up some of the translations of the philosophical texts, they're in English. Can you understand what they're saying? Yeah, they're not easy to understand. Okay, different vocabulary and words you've never heard, and long sentences and topics you've never thought of. So that's what I mean. I felt like I was translating from English into English, trying to make some of this material understandable for a Western audience. So as the manuscript increased in length, we realized that instead of being a book, it would become a series of books. So in oral teachings, His Holiness weaves various topics together in a way that we listeners may have not considered before, opening up new meanings and perspectives. And this is really one of the beauties and skills that His Holiness has as a teacher, is topics that you've thought about, but you haven't joined together. He will pull them together so that you see how they're related. Yeah, it's brilliant. So he also goes from simple to complex topics and back again in a matter of minutes, making one talk pertinent for both beginners and advanced practitioners. He doesn't expect us to understand everything at the first explanation and knows that our understanding will grow slowly as new layers of meaning are revealed to our minds as a result of our purification, collection of merit, study, and reflection. Okay? So the whole approach to learning Buddhism is different than our approach to learning in secular material in secular schools. Okay? In secular schools, secular material, you're supposed to remember what the teacher said, what the book said, and be able on a test to tell the teacher what they already know. And the more you can tell them what they already know, the better grade you get. Okay, and you're expected to master that material. Okay, in Buddhism, it's the understanding is that we are changing our mind, transforming our whole mind. We're not just learning information. Okay, practicing Dharma is a process of building character, of making ourselves into certain kinds of people with compassionate motivations and the kind of wisdom to be able to help others. Yeah. So we're not, because this is a gradual process, our teachers don't expect us to learn everything and understand everything the first time. The idea is that we hear it many, many, many times. And each time you hear it differently. Yeah. And your mind understands it at a different level. And so this is why when His Holiness teaches, even the Geshis, the scholars, the meditators, the people who know the Dharma really well, all attend his teachings, because each time they hear even the introductory topics, it goes in at a different level. So it's very much a process of putting imprints in the mind, of familiarizing our mind with different topics, different ways of thinking, different emotional feelings. Okay? So that's why we're not expected just to learn some material and feed it back, or even to understand everything at once. Yeah. So we have to listen, think about what we hear. Yeah. Meditate as best as we can. And that process puts seeds on our mind stream and latencies on our mind stream. And then slowly, with more familiarization, our understanding increases until it becomes actual realizations of the material. Okay? So it's a slow process. So don't expect yourself to understand everything. Okay? Okay, so for this reason, the volumes in this series are meant to be read again and again, so that each time you will discover new gems. The volumes can also be read individually if you're interested in a particular topic, or to be used as a resource when you need to look up a specific point. But you will get the most from them if you are able to start at the beginning and read through. Okay? So then there's an overview of a samsara, nirvana, and Buddha nature. So this is just to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about. So rather than read it, I will just look at the table of contents and go through that with you. Okay, so we start with an introduction by His Holiness. Okay, then we go into a chapter called The Self, the Four Truths, and their 16 Attributes. So there, His Holiness starts with talking about being at an interfaith conference where everybody was asked 3 questions about the self. Okay, so we'll get into that probably tonight. Then we talk about the 4 truths. By the way, I don't say 4 noble truths, because the actual thing is it's 4 truths seen by the Aryas. Okay, so the Aryas the term was translated as a noble being because they see reality directly. But to say the 4 noble truths, and the first one is dukkha, unsatisfactory experiences, people say, well, what in the world is noble about that? And especially when they translate dukkha as suffering, there's nothing noble about that. Okay? So that's why I usually say the 4 truths of the noble, of the Aryas, or just simply the 4 truths. Okay? And I don't say true suffering, because, again, that's a misleading translation. Yeah? Because people aren't, in relative conventional language, we don't say we're suffering all the time, do we? Sometimes we're happy. Or you say the truth is truth of suffering. And then people will start out with all life is suffering. And, in some countries it may be, but in other places it's not. Okay? And so if you translate dukkha as suffering, it's very confusing and misleading. But it actually means unsatisfactory experiences. So if I ask you, is your life one continuous stream of satisfactory, happy experiences? What are you going to say? No, I have many unsatisfactory experiences. Okay, so that term of dukkha is usually just, I leave that in the Pali Sanskrit word, okay, instead of saying suffering, because I just think suffering is too misleading. Okay, so we talk about the 4 truths, the coarse and subtle forms, and their 16 aspects. Okay, so His Holiness hits us with the big stuff right away, Then chapter 2 is revolving in cyclic existence, and that goes into the truth of dukkha. Okay, So it talks about the realms of existence, the 3 kinds of dukkha, the 6 disadvantages of cyclic existence, the 8 unsatisfactory conditions, examining dukkha via the 10 points. If you like lists with numbers, Buddhism is the religion for you. Yeah, there's plenty of lists with plenty of numbers, but it helps you to remember the material. Okay. Then the 3rd chapter is about the true origin of dukkha. And there we talk about different kinds of defilements, afflictions, underlying tendencies, fetters, pollutants, hindrances. And this chapter, we have a lot from the Sanskrit tradition and also from the Pali tradition. And so you'll see the similarities and as well as the differences in how they talk about this. Chapter 4 is afflictions, their arising and their antidotes. So we talk here about the order in which afflictions arise, factors that cause them to arise, feelings that accompany them, the ethical dimensions of afflictions, counter forces, and so on. Chapter 5 is more about afflictions. Okay, because they're the chief troublemaker that we have to abolish. And we not only talk about afflictions, but also the polluted karma that they create and the seeds and latencies of both karma and afflictions. So acquired and innate afflictions, coarse and subtle afflictions, seeds, latencies, having ceased, all these kinds of things. Okay. Then chapter 6 is karma, the universe, and evolution. And this chapter is taken really from an interview I had with His Holiness. I can't even remember how many years ago. It was a really, really long time. Maybe even in the 80s or the 90s. It was a long time ago. And because I wanted to know, did karma create the world? And we hear that our world is created by mind. What in the world does that mean? How does the mind create the world? So I had gone in for an interview, and it was his usual translator wasn't there, so he called Gareth from the dialectic school, who came and translated, and that's where this chapter is from. Yeah. Then chapter 7 gets into revolving and cyclic existence, so the 12 links of dependent origination. And then chapter 8 goes on more about dependent origination and how we cycle in samsara. So how the different links occur in various combinations according to the Sanskrit tradition and also the Pali tradition. Chapter 9 goes into meditating on the 12 links and how to generate what is often called renunciation. And that word is usually misinterpreted. I think a better translation is the aspiration for liberation or the determination to be free, because often when people in our culture hear you have to generate renunciation, they think, oh, I have to give up chocolate. I have to give up a house. I have to give up everything and live in a cave on nettles in the freezing cold. Yeah, without my teddy bear, without my electric blanket, without my, oh my God, I have to give up my cell phone. Yeah. But renunciation, it means suffering, Renunciation to people means you're giving up your happiness to practice the path. Yeah. This is part of our cultural conditioning. Okay? when you get to see the Judaic Christian cultural conditioning and how we think. But in Buddhism, what renunciation means, what are you renouncing? You're renouncing dukkha. You're renouncing all your unsatisfactory experiences. Yeah, because you want to attain liberation and you want to attain a lasting state of happiness. Okay? So again, in the book, trying to refine the vocabulary a little bit that we're using. Okay, chapter 10 is seeking genuine peace. And so going into the forward and reverse orders of both the afflictive and the purified sides of the 12 links. And then the transcendental dependent origination from the Pali tradition. And that I found it very, very interesting because they talked about the steps there, the qualities you generate as like a series of dependent links. Okay, then chapter 11 is freedom from cyclic existence. So here talking about the stages leading to liberation and full awakening, the two obscurations, the afflictive obscurations, the cognitive obscurations, Nirvana, and how Nirvana is spoken of in the Sanskrit tradition and in the Pali tradition. And then Bodhi, or awakening. Okay. Then chapter 12 gets into the mind and its potential, because having 10 chapters that are pretty much on the first two truths, and the 11th chapter on Nirvana, I figured people needed something more uplifting at the end of the book. And talking about the actual path, that's going to come in volume 4. And it's quite large, and I couldn't squeeze it all into this volume. So we put Buddha nature here, because Buddha nature, usually it doesn't fit in a particular place in the Lam Rim. You don't see a chapter called Buddha nature in the Lam Rim. It's usually taught in a text called Gyu Lama, or the Sublime Continuum. So here starting to talk about the mind and its potential, again, from the Pali viewpoint, the Yogacara or Chittamatra viewpoint, the Prasangika viewpoint, and then chapter 13 and 14, both of them about Buddha nature. So, talking about what Buddha nature is, then there's different similes about, for the Tathagata, which is, Tathagata is like Buddha nature, but not exactly the same. Okay. And, then 14 goes into the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, the link, how there's a link between the second and third, in terms of describing true path and what is Buddha nature, and then how that leads us into Tantra and the 3 kayas, or the 3 bodies of a Buddha. So we talk some about that, about the causal clear light, what continues to awakening, a little bit about Dzogchen and Mahamudra, and then, are we already Buddhas? Because some schools, teach, well, you're already a Buddha. Yeah. But that gives rise to a question of, if I'm already a Buddha, why do I need to practice? Okay. So we go into that whole argument and how and why and what the Buddha was really trying to get across to people when he said, you have Buddha nature. Because sometimes Buddha nature can refer to the causal Buddha nature, that we have the potential to become a Buddha. Sometimes Buddha nature, that term, like in the Tathagata Sutra, can be used to refer to awakening. Okay, the nature of a Buddha. Okay, so talking a little bit about that. So that's an overview of what we're going to get into. So there's a lot. Okay, but it's really interesting stuff. Yeah. Don't get overwhelmed yet. So let's start first with His Holiness's introduction. So I'll read and then explain a little bit. So His Holiness begins with how to study the teachings. So this part is from the Lamrim, but it's an excellent example. Okay. As with all activities, our attitude and motivation for learning and practicing the Buddha Dharma affect the value of our actions. So generally, motivation is the most important thing in an action because it's what determines whether an action is virtuous or non-virtuous. By the way, talking about vocabulary and translation terms, some people don't like the terms virtuous and non-virtuous. They use wholesome and unwholesome. Some people don't like wholesome and unwholesome, and they talk about, there's all sorts of different things, okay? Basically, what it comes down to is there's no good translation because sometimes using virtuous and non-virtuous, people in the West go back to the religion they grew up with, okay? And then they think in terms of what's virtuous and non-virtuous in that religion. But there's some overlays, but some things that aren't. So we don't want to really use, I try not to use Judeo-Christian words. You will not find the word sin in this series. That word is abolished, okay? Because I think it's too much of a loaded word for people in the West, okay? So I personally have just gotten used to virtuous and non-virtuous. I didn't like wholesome and unwholesome so much, because it's like in the 1950s, all the girls were wholesome young women. Remember that? And my generation, we were not so wholesome. Okay. Not that we were virtuous either. But, so I stuck with virtue and non-virtue, So keeping 6 factors in mind will enable you to have a beneficial motivation. So first, see yourself as a sick person who wants to recover. Our illness is samsara, cyclic existence, and the dukkha, the unsatisfactory circumstances that permeate us. So that is the illness we suffer from. Dukkha includes being subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death under the influence of afflictions and karma, as well as not getting what we want, being separated from what we love, and encountering problems we don't want. Okay, that's enough, isn't it? Seeing ourselves as ill, we will approach the teachings with sincerity and receptivity. So this is really important, We have to come into the Dharma with an attitude of humility, with an attitude of realizing that our life is not hunky-dory and that we don't have control over it and that we don't even understand our mind. We don't even understand why we got here or what the meaning of our life is. Yeah. We're very, very confused. So we have to come in feeling like the sick person, and being open and receptive and humble and willing to listen. Humility does not mean we don't question. Yes, we question. We have to question in order to gain the right understanding. But humility means that we don't come in as a know-it-all. Okay? Because in some other aspects of our life, we may feel like a know-it-all. Okay? And you walk in and like, okay, I know what this is all about. And oh, you guys teach Buddhism. You teach rebirth. I don't believe in rebirth. Prove it to me. It's your job to prove it to me. It's not my job to try and understand it. You see. Anyway, I know all about how things function. Yeah. And I'm an intelligent person. And look at all my sheets of paper of all the courses I've taken and degrees I have. Look at one sheet after another after another. I am educated. I know it all. Okay. Now, the only time I thought I knew it all and was close to omniscience was at age 16. Because I think most of us knew it all at age 16. Didn't you? Yeah. The first thing you knew is that your parents didn't know very much. Yeah. But, you know, as you live, you realize, oh, I too don't know very much. Okay. So coming in with that kind of really an earnest attitude that seeks to understand. Okay. Second, regard the teacher as a kind doctor who correctly diagnoses our illness and prescribes the medicine to cure it. Our samsara is rooted in mental afflictions, the chief of which is ignorance that misapprehends the ultimate nature of phenomena. So although we want happiness, our minds are continually overwhelmed by attachment, anger, and confusion that cause us misery here and now and create the karma for future dukkha. Okay? So we have to see our situation that we're living in right now as an illness, something that has to be overcome in order for us to have actual health and to have some kind of secure form of happiness. The Dharma teacher, the Buddha, is our teacher, yeah, and is like the doctor, yeah. So if you're a know-it-all, you don't go to the doctor because you know it all, and you're not going to believe the doctor because your doctor doesn't know anything. Okay? So that's why we have to see we're a sick person. We don't know how to cure ourselves. We have to go to somebody who knows more than we do. Yeah? So we go to the Buddha and say, here I am, what's wrong? Yeah. Buddha diagnoses it. Oh, you're suffering from dukkha and its causes. Yeah. And he's going to prescribe medicine. Okay. So that's the next. Third, we seek teachings as the medicine to cure our illness. Okay. The Buddha prescribes the medicine of the 3 higher trainings in ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, and the medicine of bodhicitta and the 6 perfections: generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, and wisdom. Okay. And then fourth, understand that practicing the teachings is the method to heal. Okay. So, yeah, the teachings are the medicine. Yeah. And then we have to practice the teachings in order to heal ourselves. Okay? And so we don't just take notes. Yeah. We don't just highlight in our book, put the book back on the cupboard, put the notes somewhere high, or just, stash them in your computer someplace, and then forget about things. Yeah. If we do that, that's like going to the drugstore, buying the medicine, bringing it home, putting it in your bottom drawer, and forgetting about it. Or maybe you just put it in the bathroom cupboard and forget about it there. Or even a little bit closer on your bedside table, and you forget about it there. But you don't take the medicine. Okay? So you bothered to go to the doctor, get the medicine, and then you said, "Pooey, I'm not taking this stuff." Okay? And we do that with the Dharma teachings sometimes too, don't we? Yeah, oh, this teaching, very interesting, type. Oh, so interesting, yes, teacher's so wise, this is really good. Oh, I'm going to go home and practice. This is the medicine that's really going to help me, and I'm going to go home and practice. Okay, shut your computer, leave the session, go out with your friends, have a good time, drink, drug, go to the disco. Maybe you're not that kind of person, so you open Netflix, yeah, and you watch something on Netflix and order a pizza, or you go to the beach with your friends, but you don't actually sit down and even review your notes, yeah, or even think about what you heard, because you went to the Dharma teaching because, well, it was interesting, and the teacher is really entertaining. Yeah. Subject matter, sometimes, they start out, they read lists, There's the 3 kinds of dukkha, this dukkha, that dukkha, that dukkha. Then there's the 6 disadvantages of samsara. This 1, 2, 3. So those 2 kind of teachers, I'm not going to go back to. I want to be entertained. Everything, life is about entertainment, isn't it? Isn't it? In the age of internet, with click and push button happiness. So I want to be entertained. And don't make the teachings too long. I have a meditation span of 2 minutes. Yeah. So I'll pay attention for 2 minutes, and then I'll kind of check out everybody else in the room and say, oh, there's some good-looking guy over there, and see, and then, after a few minutes, come back to the teachings. Yeah. So this is, when we're not real serious, we're not seeing ourselves as the sick person, and we're not really thinking of the doctor as somebody who knows something we don't, and not really respecting the medicine either. Okay, the next paragraph says, when we are ill, we naturally respect the doctor, trust the medicine, and want to take it, even if it doesn't taste so good. Well, not everybody does that, but this is looking optimistically. Okay, if we second guess the doctor or complain about the medicine, we won't take it. Similarly, if we don't respect the Buddha and the Dharma, we won't practice it. Yeah. This is so old. He's lived 2,500 centuries ago. What did they know 2,500 centuries ago? Nothing. Yeah. They didn't even know about the periodic chart. They talked about all these partless particle kind of things, and particles of earth, water, fire, space, wind. How does fire have a part? These people, they didn't know anything about science. Yeah, why should I listen to them? Okay. There's a lot of that kind of thinking, yeah, nowadays. Okay. But on the other hand, when His Holiness has met with scientists and they actually are curious and they listen, then they become very, very interested in similarities and differences between Buddhist philosophy and what they're discovering in science. Okay, and the theories behind the scientific discoveries. So similarly, if we don't respect the Buddha and the Dharma, we won't practice. Likewise, if we have a prescription but don't fill it, or fill it but don't take the medicine, we won't recover. We must make an effort to learn and practice the Dharma and not simply collect statues, texts, prayer beads, blessing cords, pictures of, various lamas, pictures of various deities. And nowadays, collect, not even CDs, but, download on your iPod all these mantras that have music with them. Oh, mani padme hum, oh, mani padme. But not just we sing it with that melody, but there's things that have the instrumentals with it. Yeah. So you learn and, that's good. And then you can even start dancing. Okay. And, we have to be amused. But we actually have to make an effort to practice and not just collect stuff. Okay. Curing the illness is a collaborative process between the doctor and patient. We must both do our parts. And here's a quote from the King of Concentration Sutra. Some people are ill, their bodies tormented. For many years, there is not even temporary relief. Afflicted with illness for a very long time, they seek a doctor in search of a cure. Searching again and again, they at last find a physician with skill and knowledge. Treating the patients with compassion, the doctor gives medicine, saying, "Here, take this." The medicine is plentiful, good, and valuable. It will cure the illness, but the patients do not take it. This is not a shortcoming of the doctor, nor a fault of the medicine. It is just the negligence of those who are ill. I have explained, the Buddha is saying this, I have explained this very good teaching, yet if you, having heard it, do not practice correctly, then just like a sick person holding a bag of medicine, your illness cannot be cured. Powerful. Okay. So taking the medicine entails looking beyond the words we hear and trying to understand their deeper meaning. When that is clear in our minds, then we must consistently put it into practice. Notice the word consistently. Notice the word practice. Practice means repetition. Consistency means doing it consistently, in an organized manner, not on and off, okay? When taking ordinary medicine, we must follow the instructions properly and take the whole cycle. If you have TB and you just take a little bit of the medicine, it won't cure the TB. You have to take the whole thing. If you have an antibiotic, you have to take the whole round of antibiotics, not just a few tablets until you feel well. Why? Because the virus is still in your system and it will reappear, and it will be worse because it has mutated, and if you take the same antibiotics again, it may not kill that mutation. Okay. So this is we're learning this through COVID, but we heard it before. This book was written before COVID. Okay. So then and only then, when we consistently put the Dharma into practice, will our disease of dukkha and afflictions be cured. When taking ordinary medicine, we must follow the instructions properly and take the whole cycle. If we take the medicine for a few days and stop, we won't get well. It's like meditating on the antidote to anger once or twice and expecting that you will never get angry again. Forget it. We have to remember that the seeds of our anger have been there since beginningless time. So we need to, take the medicine for a long time to reverse that. Similarly, if we don't like the taste of the medicine, and so mix in all sorts of better tasting things, or leave the medicine aside just to eat the better tasting things, we won't recover. Yeah. Have you ever had medicine that tastes awful? Yeah. And remember when you were a little kid and, mom had to grind it up, the medicine, and mix it with applesauce? Yeah. Or if you're lucky, you talked her into mixing it with ice cream. Yeah. But you had to push really hard for that. It was usually applesauce. And then, it was like open wide, zoom. Okay. So our commitment to practicing the teachings as we are able to is a crucial element in our awakening. Okay. The Sangha are the ones who are like the nurses who, smash up the medicine and mix it with the applesauce and give it to us. So if, that's why practicing with the Sangha is very helpful. Of course, the real Sangha that's our refuge are the Arya beings, okay? The substitute or the representative for the Sangha is a monastic community, not just one monastic, but 4 or more monastics who perform the Vinaya rites, okay? The Sangha is not just one person who goes to a Dharma center, okay? But the function, of the Sangha, of those who are elder in the Dharma than us, is to help us practice and answer our question, encourage us, get us to the cushion when we can't get ourselves to the cushion. Okay. 5th, is to regard the Buddhas as excellent, wise, and compassionate beings. And 6th is to pray that the teachings will exist for a very long time so that many sentient beings can benefit from them. Okay, so those are the last 2. So we want to really regard the Buddhas as excellent beings who are our refuge, who we trust, and we trust what they teach. And then as we practice the teachings and see their benefit, our respect for the Dharma increases, our respect for the Buddha who taught it increases, our respect for the Sangha who practice it increases. And from that, then we want to really dedicate so that these teachings exist for a very long time in a pure fashion so that many, many sentient beings can meet the Dharma. Okay, then cultivate an altruistic motivation, thinking, I want to be free from the dukkha of samsara and will seek the Buddha's medicine that, when practiced properly, will lead me to good health. But I am not the only sick person. Countless sentient beings also wander in samsara and suffer from the afflictions. May I become a skillful and compassionate doctor like the Buddha so that I can help all other sentient beings to be free from the dukkha of samsara. So we generate the bodhicitta motivation. Okay, let's pause here first and see, are there any questions before we go on?
Can Venerable talk a little about the beautiful cover for the book, who designed it, and any other backstory?
Oh, okay. I don't know who painted this particular version of the Wheel of Life. The Wheel of Life in general, the story, I'll see if I can get the details on the story right. One king wanted to give a gift to another king and wanted to expose him to the Buddha Dharma. So he had somebody design this Wheel of Life and sent it to that king as a gift. And that is the origin of the picture. Okay. Like I said, I don't know who painted this particular one, but this particular one, okay, is from the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala. And I was able to get it to use for the cover here because the current director of the library, Geshe Laktor, is an old friend of mine from way back. And he was also the one who translated at some of the early interviews I had with His Holiness back in the 90s. And so when I was in Dharamsala, some years ago, I went to visit him. He's now the director of the library. And he gave me one of their annual reports. And there was this picture in it. And I said, please, can I have a high resolution digital, thing of this picture to use for the cover. And Geshe Laktor very kindly arranged to give me that. So that's the backstory of this particular drawing. Okay. The covers, by the way, were designed by Wisdom Publications. I don't know. There have been various people who have designed the different covers, and various people within the publishing company that I work with for different activities. Ben is one of the people who puts the whole book together. So he's involved in a lot of this. And Mary is my editor. So, yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Nowadays, at least, I don't know for how long already, it seems to be difficult for many people like us to have respect. And can you speak a little bit more about how to develop respect and what hinders us? I mean, you were touching on it that, we need to see the Buddha as wise and compassionate. Can you speak a little bit more how to approach that topic?
Okay. So I agree with you that this day respect is in short order. Yeah. Everybody seems to want respect, but not want to give respect, because sometimes we think of if somebody is respectable, then they are higher than us. And of course, we want to be the highest. Okay. We want to be the most respected and honored. So it's hard for us to see other people's good qualities. Actually, that becomes a big hindrance on the path, because if we can't see others' good qualities, then how are we going to generate those same qualities ourselves? That's why humility is really important. Okay? Is we have to be able to see the good qualities in others. How to see them? First, we have to stop the incessant chatter in our mind that says, I want to be best. I want to be first. Actually, I don't like myself very much, but if I can convince other people that I'm a wonderful person and be high on their list of people they like, then maybe I can try and convince myself that I'm okay. We have to get rid of that attitude. Okay? Because, and stop competing with other people. And instead, really, respect people's talents and abilities. Yeah. And I came to that personally by finally figuring out that if I were the best, then the world would be in a really bad situation. Okay? I don't know anything about electricity except how to turn the switch on and how to change a bulb. I don't know anything about plumbing except how to flush the toilet and turn on the water faucet. I don't know anything about construction except how to get frustrated over it. Yeah, most things I don't know anything about. Yeah, I don't know how to grow seeds. I know you plant or grow food. I know you plant seeds and you have to give water and fertilizer, but I don't know how much, in what season, and so on. You know, if you left me to my devices, I wouldn't be able to survive. And if my knowledge were the culmination of human knowledge, we would be back even before the cave people. Okay? So that was helpful for me to develop respect. Also helpful, especially in terms of respect for the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, was as I started to practice the teachings in my own life, as I started to practice the antidotes to anger, the antidotes to self-centeredness, the antidotes to greed, and so on. As I practiced them, I saw that they worked. And what did they say? The proof is in the pudding. Yeah. So when you practice something and it works and it helps you, and you aren't as depressed as you used to be, and you aren't as dissatisfied, you aren't as nasty to other people as you used to be, then, okay, the Buddha knows something. He knows what he's talking about. These people who practice it, they're onto something. The teachings themselves have some wisdom. Okay, so I think by gaining some personal experience of them, even just the bare minimum that I learned at my very first Dharma course, that was enough to have me respect the three jewels. I had zillions of questions. My questions were not all answered, but the little bit of practice that I did, and also contemplating the teachings and how they really, as a worldview, they made so much sense. So that also increased my respect.
Question is, what does it entail not to be respectful to the Buddha and the Dharma?
Well, say that again.
What does it entail to not be respectful to the Buddha and the Dharma?
Okay, so not being respectful to the Buddha and the Dharma is what I was just saying. Like the Dharma, it was taught 25 centuries ago. They didn't know about rocket science. They didn't know about computers. What do they know? And the Buddha, he was just one guy. He didn't even go to college. I have a PhD. Yeah. Well, I have a BS. Well, maybe I graduated from high school. But I know a lot. And what did the Buddha know? Those people then didn't know very much, and I'm learning from Tibetan teachers. Tibetans, they didn't even have the wheel until after 1959. Can you imagine that? A culture that didn't even have the wheel? What do those people know? They're country bumpkins. I'm educated. I'm wise. Yeah. So that kind of attitude.
How do we ensure that we are consistent in taking medicine? And were there external factors that Venerable created or found to support her in consistently taking the medicine when she was new to the Dharma?
Okay. So when I was new to the Dharma, I went to my first course. It was 3 weeks long. I was a teacher at the time, so I wasn't working in the summer. So I went to the course. I came home. I wasn't working. I had free time. So I set up a daily meditation practice to review everything that I learned in that course. And so that got me going on having a regular meditation practice. And I just continued from there. Yeah. I think you have to have when you see the value of having a daily practice, whether you're doing a formal meditation or whether you're doing a reading from a Dharma book or watching a video and paying attention while you're watching it, you have to have something that values what you're learning. And then when you value it and it means something to you, then you just include it as a regular part of your life. Like we eat every day. Why? Because we need to nourish our body, and we value the fact that our body needs nourishment. So we make sure we eat every day. So it's like we not only have to nourish our body, we have to nourish our heart and our mind. Otherwise we just we're out of touch with ourselves. We're upset and depressed and anxious all the time. So, when you start to practice and you see even a little bit of benefit, then encourage yourself and really make it as part of your day. Everybody has a morning ritual. Yeah. Don't you have a morning ritual you do every single morning? Yeah. So you just include some meditation in your morning ritual. Yeah. You never forget to brush your teeth. We don't forget to eat breakfast. There's things we do every morning. So you just include to nourish your mind, make enough time and space in the morning so that you can do this. Okay. Now, that may mean that you have to go to bed a little bit earlier. And that may mean that you have to give up your favorite TV show. I know that's incredible suffering. Or you have to give up, texting your friends back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, or talking on the phone or having a Skype call just to get to bed a little bit earlier. But it's okay to give up those things. We're not going to die. Yeah. And then your friends go, well, you used to stay up and talk with me late. Now you're going to bed early. What's up? What are you doing in the morning that you have to do that? And you say, I have an appointment early in the morning. Yeah, because you always nowadays, you have to have an appointment. Your whole schedule has to be completely filled. Otherwise, you don't have a life. Yeah, you have to be over busy every moment so that people will think that you are active and positive and popular and together. Yeah. As you take your anti-anxiety medicine because you are so stressed out. Okay. But, I have an appointment. That usually stops people. Yeah. Sometimes they might say, who do you have an appointment with so early in the morning? The Buddha. I have an appointment with the Buddha. Yeah. Isn't that what your meditation practice is about every morning? You have an appointment with the Buddha. You check in with the Buddha every day because the Buddha is your best friend. And you certainly don't stand the Buddha up. That is not good. Okay? So you get to your appointment every day. And it just becomes part of your life, part of your habit.